Welcome to this edition of Lift Every Voice, a program of the Louisville branch NAACP, in which we seek to keep our community informed of the issues impacting our community and to make certain that as informed individuals, you can in fact change what takes place. And so the NAACP has a mission, which is to ensure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights for all persons. Everybody knows about the work the NAACP does in the educational arena, in the political arena, the voting rights arena, and in Veterans Affairs. But today we're going to talk about something that directly impacts the Louisville community, and that is environmental justice. The NAACP, as a part of its mission, is addressing environmental justice all across this country and having some real impact. Today we are fortunate enough to have with us our very special guest, Arnita Gadson, who is in fact chair of the Louisville branch NAACP Environmental Justice Committee and also chair of the State Environmental Justice Committee. Yeah, Arnita, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, when we hear about it, environmental justice, people understand in terms of Flint, Michigan and water. They understand in terms of oil fields in Texas and refineries and that. But when we talk about environmental justice, what are we really talking about?
Environmental justice actually is defined by EPA in the short version that no one is disproportionately affected by pollution, which includes air, water, soil. In other words, that if one of us are affected, all of us affected, or if none of us are affected, that means exactly what it is, none. So that's basically the short version of the environmental justice definition.
So give us a little bit more of the longer version.
Well, here in Louisville, we have what we call Rubber Town. Okay. And Rubber Town actually gives us 42% of all the emissions in Jefferson County. It gives us 14 to 15% of all the emissions in the state of Kentucky. So it is a big issue. However, Rubber Town is located in southwest Jefferson County, where mostly it is the minority population. So therefore, those who live in
you can call those minority folks black folks. We don't have
black folks, okay. Black folks, and all those that are not white.
Right.
Now put it that way.
Okay.
So what does it say? That says people that are east of 9th Street and further out, they're not affected as much by the Rubber Town facilities. Now that we do have things here in Kentucky, in Louisville, we have Ford truck plant, which is out on Chamberlain Lane.
Right.
Many people try to say, that that's not an environmental justice issue. Now, environmental justice goes a little bit further in that it has to be minority and or poor or low income.
Okay.
So we have an environmental issue, we have a justice issue, but it's not an EJ issue because of the definition, because most people in that area are not low income and they are not minority, but only those people out in that area are affected by that Ford truck plant. All of us are, but mostly them.
So tell me, as we talk about this, and primarily in terms of West Louisville, what you don't know was that when my wife and I first got married, we lived at 44th and Garland Street in West Louisville. And I could tell you that in terms of the air that I breathed when I lived at 44th and Garland, is very, very different from the air that I now breathe when I live in Prospect. So tell us how we, as a community, as a committee, are we addressing some of these issues?
Well, this has been going on, of course, for a long time. And of course, I've been working in this arena now for about 26 years. And one of the things when I came into it as the Environmental Justice Director at the University of Louisville, that was my goal, was to see what we could do about the environmental issues in West Louisville. Now, what we did monitoring. We found out that everything people were saying were true, that the emissions were above what they should be. And because of that, it was decided, in fact, that the decision was kind of unique because no one thought they would find that. Okay. So once we found that, it's like, what do we do about it? At that time, Mayor Abramson was the mayor. So he just basically said, I can't have this. I can't bring businesses in here. Now, what was amazing to me is that this is hurting people. This is hurting people that are already here. We have higher levels of diabetes, of cancer, asthma, the upper respiratory, kidney disease, in West Louisville. But he was concerned about bringing business. He did not want to bring business into a community that had this high rate of emissions. So in his quest to do that, it also helped West Louisville. He said, I've got to do something about it. So my suggestion was to change regulations. Of course, that didn't meet with, but what happened was we finally sat down, and it was a collaboration between EPA, Division for Air Quality. They're the one that supplied the money for the monitoring, University of Louisville, and the West Jefferson County Community Task Force at that time. And so we developed a program called STAR, Strategic Toxic Air Regulation Program. Under that, we have emissions.
So what year did the STAR start?
The STAR started in 2000. I always get this wrong. 2003, I think, was around that time. And and that is still ongoing. With the STAR program, we have reduced some chemicals by 85%. 1,3-butadiene, benzene. There are others that we have actually gotten to what we call a de minimis amount, which is non-detect. You can't detect it. That doesn't mean that we don't have a long way to go, because that company is still out there. Okay. So up to this point, these are the things that we have done, and I'm using my hands.
Okay. So, and I probably got ahead of myself by jumping directly to that. Your experience in this area, as you say, you have more than 20 years experience. So walk us through what your experience had been that gets us to the day.
In 1997 was when I went to University of Louisville, working in the capacity of environmental justice. After that, I left Louisville, went to the state as the executive director for the Environmental Quality Commission that was under Governor Steve Beshear, and then now coming back and as the executive director of the West Jefferson County Community Task Force. This is a community organization that I've been working with ever since 1997. Okay. And of course, coming back, I thought I had retired, but coming back, and so now I find myself with as the chair of the ECJ committee. Yeah.
So let's talk about the West Jefferson Task Force, which is about. Tell me about how it came about, how long it's been there, and what it really does in terms of a monitor or as an organization pushing for accountability.
That organization, the task force was actually the community group that actually sponsored and promoted the monitoring. Okay. That was a push that people did not want. I sat at a table with all environmental engineers, toxicologists, epidemiologists, and said, we have to do something. We have to show proof. They told me they couldn't do it because they did projects with the Rubbertown people. So I asked them, so what's your point? We have to do something. So with that, once people got on board, that was the problem, was getting people on board. And the community had already done some work before I came. They had met, Reverend Coleman was that, met with 500 community folks, and they had done an action agenda. Okay. But that was it. Once the action agenda was done, it was sponsored by the health department, and the health department felt like they had facilitated and their work was done. Okay. So with all of these 38 recommendations, my first focus was, what do you want to do first? And they said air. Okay. So that's what got us into the air. And of course, we used to look at what they call TRI reports, their toxic release inventory reports. These are reports that the companies make to EPA and talk about, what they have, their leaks, their fugitives, Right. Now, my issue was, who knows what's on the TRIs, because EPA did not necessarily monitor. They just took the reports.
Okay. When you talk about monitoring, I guess there are several different ways of monitoring. There are actually monitoring stations around the community. Yes. There are monitoring stations within those businesses that are, in fact, create part of the pollution. And then there are the people who oversee what these individuals are doing as monitors. So talk about the sort of three different levels of monitoring that's taking place.
What we have now we no longer have the monitoring that we did. They were with canisters.
Okay.
And you had to build like a block, put the canister in and set it there and then come back and get it. We did it, we only had money for every 12 days to do the monitoring.
Okay.
EPA says that you have to do a year's worth of monitoring to have enough data to look at. So that's what we did. So that was the basic monitoring. We don't have that anymore because the Department for Air Quality decided they didn't want to, finance it anymore. So we have been without that basic monitoring, but there's new monitoring now that's done. Air Pollution Control District now has a monitoring program where it's like in real time, where you can actually look and see what's going on through the, So the technology has changed, but we're really trying to get that back because that was always the base. That was the base. Even the companies looked at our base because if they knew they were within that realm, then they were doing good.
Okay. I think a lot of people in the community, when we talk about the environment in terms of what is taking place, there are some specific projects, specific things in the community where there have been issues. So I'll start with the sort of the Bourbon Fungus or the fungus in individual homes. So tell us about that and how are we addressing it, if we're addressing it?
Well, I wish we were addressing it more. Mm-hmm. Brown-Forman has doubled their production in whiskey. Yeah. And of course, along comes with that is ethanol. And most of us know ethanol as, either the alcohol, And so, but what happens with that, when it mixes with certain chemicals, it adheres to houses. And it is, yes, you can take bleach water, you can wash it off the house. But even after you wash it off so many times, you're going to have one side of your house that's going to be a little different color than the other. So that is an issue. That's a real issue. What we're trying to do is work with Brown-Forman to see if there's an opportunity that Brown-Forman will step up to the plate and say, well, since we're doing this, let's do something. If it's no more than washing the houses that would be a professional wash. Right. Now, I do understand now that there's a paint that this mold will not adhere to. Okay. So that's the other thing that we're trying to work with them. So
how is that being pushed in the community, and how are, say, people who live in the community being made aware of that?
Well, we just had, in fact, I just found out that they were doing double their production because they asked for a permit. Okay. Every time things change, you have to be permitted. So once the permit was out there and I realized that was the first thing I did was call and say, well, I know that ethanol is what we call a volatile organic compound, a VOC, which is very small particles that we breathe. Right. So we did know that ethanol was a VOC, but it really isn't that dangerous. Mm-hmm. The mold does not do the harm that we perhaps think it does. It does more harm to your house, to your car, to the stop sign, to the side of the building. That's where it is. But that's a quality of life thing. What does that do? That lowers your house value. That lowers everything that's around you. So now what we're doing, the community task force, the West Jefferson County Community Task Force has meetings every month. We've had them for 26 years, every month. And we just talked about it a month ago. So we're going to revisit it. From that talk, we're going to revisit it again.
Okay. We talked about the mold problem. A number of things take place in the community that has an environmental impact, and people are not always necessarily involved. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about infrastructure in West Louisville, or improvement or enhancement to roads and all of that, talk about how those things impact environment and how, again, the community can get involved in terms of making certain there's accountability for no adverse impact.
For one thing, there are ordinances that are already in place. You can go on, the citywide ordinances and put your city in, because after all, we have, I think, 80 independent cities. But the one thing that is involved, once we became all of Jefferson County, the ordinances apply everywhere. Okay. So, for example, if somebody's having junk in their yard and, you don't have to go to your neighborhood association, you could just look at one of the ordinances and the particular governmental agency that handles that, you call them.
Mm-hmm.
For example, in my area, across the street from me was, some college kids, and they didn't mind. They were doing some burning,
Mm-hmm.
And I looked out, the wind was high, and the flames were just dropping on the roof, but they were having a good time. That was fine. So what I did was, I told them about open burning. And then, what happened was it didn't really matter. So they did it again. Well, what did I do? All I had to do was call Air Pollution Control District. So by the time they came out, they were gone, of course. But unfortunately, when you burn something, you leave cinders.
Right.
So they put it out and left a note on the door said, as a warning not to do that.
Right.
And so they didn't. There are things like putting your garbage in. People leave their garbage out too long. There's an ordinance. You got to take your garbage can in. So all of these things, when you talk about street and roads, you can call the Division of Public Works. If you got holes in your street, all of these ordinances already in place. So what we have to do, and this is one thing that the NAACP and the task force working together, we're trying to put together a booklet. Well, we're going to copy and paste of all the ordinances and see if we can get it out there so people can understand what they can do.
You talked about ordinance and rules and regulations. As I understand it, the Commonwealth of Kentucky and Louisville in particular is under a consent decree relating to odors. Mm-hmm. So tell us about that consent decree.
Well, that consent decree actually is to the infrastructure for the sewer treatment. The odors are kind of a different thing. The odors, they tried to say was a nuisance. I've written about that too, Now, which one you want? Odors or...
Do both.
Odors are much more than a nuisance. A foul odor can throw people into seizures. They can cause, of course, headaches, burning eyes, nose running, and so odors can do physical damage. We have an odor ordinance for the state of Kentucky. At first, it wasn't clear that we had one here in Louisville, but we do. Okay. But people have to understand anything that we don't have in Louisville, we must do up under the state. Right. That's the way it works. So it says if you have an odor, you call, you give a complaint. They're supposed to send somebody out. They have this little snifter. It's kind of funny looking, but they, measure it. And then when they find what it is, they are supposed to, do a violation if they find a violation.
Talking about odors, I guess one of your West Louisville, West Jefferson task force meeting I was at, the EPA was at some point soliciting individuals. I guess they were testing new technology to detect odors and all that. Where does that stand now? We're
still trying to get the people. We only need about 10 people. But what we found was, and we have sent this out to at least 5,000 households. What we're finding out, and this is where we have to do better, is that many people say, we had another thing called Smell My City, which was an app that you could drop on your phone.
Right.
And many people would use it, but of course they want to know what happens. I'm still smelling the odor. So this is where, in my conversation with Air Pollution Control District yesterday, was that we've got to go further than that. We can collect it, but if we're not going to do anything about it, then that is futile. So that's where that is right now, and EPA is still is in the process of putting it online.
Right, and you say that you sent out over 5,000 letters looking for 10 people to participate, and you're still waiting on those 10 people. So, with our audience and people who are listening to us, how if somebody who's watching this program want to be involved, lives in West Louisville, want to be involved, how do they make known that they are interested in participating?
They can call the Air Pollution Control District at 502-574-6000 and ask to speak to Michelle King. And if you forget her name, just tell them you want to be in the odor program. And they will connect you to Michelle. Michelle is the connection to EPA. So that's it.
Okay. I guess as we address the environmental issues in terms of things, it's not only monitoring what's taking place in terms of pollutant, but it's also creating more energy efficient ways in terms of doing things. So you're working on a solar project. Tell us about this solar project and where this project is located.
One of the biggest objectives of NAACP is solar at this particular time. So the NAACP office is located on 28th Street. So right across from that is a park, and it's called it's a pocket park, which is just a little park, along with a community garden. So what we're doing is trying to get solar involved in the park. In other words, anything that is energy usage of lighting, I think I said that wrong, but hopefully they understand lighting. We're trying to get it solar so that it can save electricity. The other project that we're working on is trying to get solar, either solar usage or retrofitting. Retrofitting means we're tightening up the homes, new windows, doors, energy efficient appliances, solar carports. This thing I keep pushing people, solar carports. If you need a garage, you don't have enough money, you can put a solar carport, put some batteries there. You can use the energy from that. That may be 20%, 30%. It won't be 100, but it'll be a little bit. So with that project, we're trying to introduce at least 2,000 to 3,000 homes, depending on, it has to be qualified.
So what's the status of that process of trying to get that off the ground?
I wish I knew, Raymond.
Okay.
We've put it in, at least we have been.
Put it into who?
The city, to the American Recovery Act.
Yeah. Some of the funding.
From the American
pandemic funding.
Yes. And we've asked for that. We've asked for $14 million over a 10-year period to introduce, and not only introduce, but to put, to help people. We're talking about developing West Louisville, and if we're talking about new homes, this is a burden that I can't get into. But the one thing we can help sustainability.
Right.
We can bring the energy costs down. Your house go up, you can bring the energy costs down, and introduce people to using things that will be very, good for them.
So you're pushing this. So how can the community help in terms of pushing or bringing pressure to bear on which organization to make certain that at least what you're talking about gets considered?
Your council person. That is one of the main things. Your council person is to push whoever your council person is to try to get involved in it. Now, most of them do know about it. I think I'll put it this way: I know of 2 that know.
Okay.
But your council person, not only that, you can your Department of Economics. I think they're the ones that's really handling that money. So I don't know the head of that because I can't pronounce her last name.
Okay.
But yeah.
Well, if they call Metro Hall to speak to a council person and say, tell what the issue is, they'd be able to find out.
Yeah, so and just ask them, where is it? We know that this is going to help us. This is supposed to, I want this. I want to try to get this in my house. How do I do it?
We talk about, pushing and engaging the community, engaging our government officials in terms of what is taking place. One of the things that you mentioned to me, prior to us coming on, was a recycling facility which has been purchased at 1400 Southwestern Parkway.
Yes, we were looking at trying to purchase the property to do an environmental education center, and found out it had already been purchased. It was owned by Ford, and we found that in 2020 that the Repack Recycling Company had purchased it. That was kind of a shock because no one knew. The one thing that we do know is that they have not applied for any permits, any certifications. I've talked to MSD. MSD, said they haven't received anything. Air Pollution Control District hasn't received anything. The only thing that we know is that it is a covered recycling. Okay. But they can have drastic effects depending on what it is they're doing. The other thing that I'm concerned about, a lot of people don't think about, is the transportation trucks that bring the stuff in there. Right. Because now you've got a steady stream of trucks coming in there. So what do you do? What does it do? That interferes with the school buses. That interferes with the kids. So you've got a problem all the way around with that.
So in effect, everything that is done has a potential impact environmentally. And that we as individuals in the community have to be engaged, have to be knowledgeable. Yes. and have to be able to speak out in terms of things that we see that may be unusual, different to us, may have a far greater impact than we know. And in regards to that, as it relates to those items, if people are observing things, who should they contact? I know you chair the NAACP Environmental Justice Committee. There's the Air Pollution Control District. There's Metro Council. There's a mayor. There's a governor of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and all of those. So how does individual citizens make their voice heard by those who are in power? You can
contact me at wjcctf.com and just put in there whatever you want, when it pops up. Then Arnita Gadson, you can just put in there what you want and I'll get the message. Or you can call NAACP office at
502-776-7608.
Right. You can call NAACP. And of course, I just gave you the number to the, and most of the, just like MSD, is 540-6000.
Okay.
So if you want to get MSD, the one thing that people never think about, and I have to slide this in, and that's the highways. Yeah. If we look at 264 coming around West Louisville, we have to remember that was put in the 60s. EPA didn't exist until the 70s. So there was no control like there is now. Right. When you go to East Louisville, you see walls, you see natural barriers. When you come into West Louisville, you literally, as I say, the highway is right there next to your kitchen. Okay. So when we talk, anything we talk about that coming off that highway, there are still emissions there. Thank God we don't have lead like we did, but we have to think about that.
Okay, let me thank you, Arnita, for being a guest today to talk about environmental justice, environmental issues in West Louisville and things that need to be done. To our audience, you've heard her talk about many areas of impact, things in which you can impact. If we're going to change our community, you have to be actively engaged and involved and be part of the accountability system. And you can be part of the accountability system by joining the NAAC, Louisville Branch NAACP. Yes. And you can get our information. As she said earlier, if you want to reach us at our office, you can reach us at 502-776-7608. Or you can email the Louisville office at louisvillebranch@lounaacp.org. Or you can visit our website, which is lounaacp.org. Visit our Facebook page, which is at Louisville NAACP. And of course, you can always visit us at our office, which is at 1245 Catappa Court. The NAACP is very interested in getting you engaged in our community, getting you to have your voice heard, because we know when we all work together and we lift every voice, we can impact and change our community. Thank you for being with us today.